Many thanks to Carolyn May, who answered positively that she would come and give us her beautiful skills today. The other people whom we need to thank are Tony Metters, who is our worship associate, Peter Krouwer, who is my co-worship leader. I'm Julia Beckman, and our host team, which is headed by Jane Pulser, right here, and there will be coffee. Will there be coffee? Yes. There'll be something in the base.
Coffee and food.
Good, and refreshments afterward in the lower level to continue your conversation. You can bring it back out here too. So, welcome to this church of love and acceptance. In Unitarian Universalism, you can bring your whole self, your full identity, your questioning mind, your expansive heart. By creating meaningful communities that draw from many wisdom traditions and more, we are embodying a vision beyond belief, a vision of peace, love, and understanding.
Chalice lighting. We gathered this morning as one community, a community united by common ideals: love, justice, diversity, freedom, mutual care, equity. Yet look around. Look at the faces of those around you. Each face represents an individual. Every one of us with our own story, needs, strengths, and faults. We light our chalice today honoring our common connection and also the uniqueness that lives within each of us.
Thank you, Tony, for honoring my shortness. And pretend that the chalice is burning brightly, right in the sunlight. In our hearts, exactly, right. This is time for announcements. For a complete list of our many UCH activities, please check your news and notes, which arrive in your inbox every Friday. But here are a couple of timely items. You may leave your styrofoam today, pack it up into Karen McDowell's car. It will be delivered to the Theater of Western Springs parking lot next Saturday, thanks to the dedication of our own Karen McDowell. Yes, Karen. And then also, don't forget to shop for women's clothing, correct? Jay is still there, in the lower level of the RE building today. These items are generously being donated by our own Jay Vancura. Here he is, there he is.
Just want to mention, I just brought 30 more dresses and blouses to replace them today, as I'll do every Sunday for the next eternity. Plus then, we've run out of racks, clothes racks. So if anyone has a portable clothes rack that they could lend us to put all the more clothes out, I really appreciate it. Just bring it to the basement of the RE building, room 2. Thank you very much.
Jay is very generous, and you all just leave a small donation for the church. It's not for Jay, it's for the church, and you will remember his lovely wife, Joyce. And among the 3 books that are being highlighted this summer, which is all in your news and notes, the one that is pertinent to our conversation today is for the Social Action Group is asking that you read it, and it will be discussed. See No Stranger, a memoir and manifesto on revolutionary love by Valerie Krouwer, the book chosen by our Social Action Committee. The highlights are: how do we love in a time of rage? How do we fix a broken world while not breaking ourselves? Valerie, renowned Sikh activist, filmmaker, and civil rights lawyer, describes revolutionary love as the call of our time. It enjoins us to see no stranger, but instead look at others and say, "You are part of me I do not yet know." Our opening hymn is one that will be familiar to you. I think if you did not get the words, we have a couple of extra copies here, and you can look on with the neighbor. We sang it last week. It's "Come, Come, Whoever You Are." The background of it is sort of interesting that I looked up. The text of this poem is said to be by the famous 13th century Persian poet and theologian Rumi. The original text is from the hymn, but here's a translation. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, it doesn't matter. Ours is not a caravan of despair. Come, even if you have broken your vow 1,000 times, come yet again, come, come. Cool, we're welcome anyway, even if we've broken a few vows. But interestingly enough, if you read the hymn, that line is left out. So, but you can still feel welcome. So Carolyn is going to play it through for us first. I think you'll remember it. You do not need to stand. If you'd like to, you may, but please sing it with me twice through. Ready? Come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again, come. Once more. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again, come. Thank you. It's a good beginning. I guess that phrase didn't fit musically. I don't know. I thought it was interesting. And now, oh yes, Darren?
Volume is not that great in the back pew.
Do I have to really yell?
Real loud.
Yell. But how is that for the people sitting right in front of me? Okay, good. It is now time for that wonderful part of our service where we support the happenings and the building of our church. The offering will now be given and received. Please say the words with us. You can remember them.
With me. This church is made up of all of us. It is what we learn together, the work we do together, the fun we have together. It is what we share with one another, with people around us, and with the world.
The offering will now be given and received. That was extemporaneous. Because I left it out. I forgot one announcement. The packing the food for pods will be done today immediately after the service. The food is in the lower level of the church. And, sorry? I'm sorry, I said
Beds
pods,
plus.
didn't I? Yeah, beds plus.
Alliance room.
I was writing the script at about midnight, so if I make any other mistakes, raise your hand. Beds plus, not pads. Okay, never mind. Now, our first reading will be done by Tony.
A reading from Our Chosen Faith, an introduction to Unitarian Universalism. The reading is entitled Dialogue, is by Frederick J. Strong, Professor of World Religions and UU lay person. A dialogue by members of the world community which promotes understanding requires risk. The risk includes the possibility of arousing anger and hostility in the expression of strongly held conflicting views. Perhaps an even greater risk is this surprise in receiving new insights that require changing your own perspective. It is possible that you could discover unexplored horizons of meaning and truth. In real engagement with another person, you cannot fully foresee what will happen. At the same time, risk must be matched by trust. To expose yourself to the analysis and challenge of another person requires trust. Dialogue depends on trust that the other person is also caring, is secure enough in his or her view to allow for differences, and is open to learning new dimensions of his or her orientation that may be evoked in dialogue.
Now, if we will just take a moment to breathe deeply. Think about the words we just heard and the words we are going to hear, the beautiful day we have, and the joy of being together. Please take a moment of peace. It almost feels like a Quaker meeting. And now time for, are there joys and concerns? I did not bring the little bowl for bones, but if anyone wants to share a joy or a concern, please just rise where you are and say it, and if we need to repeat it to have it be in the recording, we will. Yes, Darren.
Today is Megan's birthday.
Happy birthday, dear Megan. Happy birthday to you.
That's my wife. A couple other things. Mostly joys. There's some visitors.
I
Distinguished
thought
visitors
so.
today.
Yay.
In the back over here, Champ and Lisa Davis are good friends of Jim and Jane Holbert's.
Oh.
And let's see. Oh, we have some other visitors. If you want to be introduced, wave. If you want to stay quiet, that's fine too. All the way in the back, raise your hand, is Susan Pregaspathy, who is from Clarendon Hills, found us on YouTube.
Yay, YouTube.
So this is her second visit with us. So, anybody else want to be introduced? Okay, I'll take that as a no. Welcome and thank you.
We will hunt you down after the service anyway, so. Thank you. Thanks, Darren. You're always so good about that. And we're always very, very happy to see our visitors. If you would like to receive a copy of our news and notes, you can please sign the sign-in book, which is staffed by Pat Miller. And we will see that you get our news and notes, which comes in Friday into your inbox every Friday. So please keep that in mind. The book is right here. Anything else, Pat?
Yes, I have a joy.
Oh, joy.
I just want to recognize Jane Folser, who's been our fearless leader of, what number are we, 2? Of Group 2, who come and work the service. And she is stepping down after many, many years.
What? No.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. And of course, Dave is always here to give her moral support, which is always helpful. Thank you so much, Jane. You're really an example for all of us. Any other? Oh, yes, Suzanne.
A very one day past happy birthday to Dave Lloyd.
Another one. A significant one. Happy 100th birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Dave. Happy birthday to you. We would have had Carolyn rehearse happy birthday if we'd known about so many. Yes, yes.
I see Jean Parvin here, so I'm going to say.
We're so happy to see you here, Jane. Sanji, yes. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Sandy. Happy birthday to you. Yeah. Oh, we should have had some champagne so she could start drinking it. Oh, no. Oh.
I also want to take this opportunity to introduce my brother, Avi,
Oh, wow. Welcome.
visiting us from Vancouver.
Wow. He's from Vancouver.
Dennis has his hand up.
We also have our very close friends from, also from Schaumburg. We have Rangel and Imogen.
I think they're the ones who wanted to remain anonymous, but that's okay. I've never.
We moved to Chicago 5 years ago,
Yeah.
and it was a pandemic and whatnot, so we had no friends.
Oh.
Our first friends.
Aww. And you're repaying the favor by bringing them to church. Thank you for doing that. Thank you so much. So much good news. There was another hand up. Dennis.
2 weeks, maybe, depending on the whims of nature. It's going to be Sunflower Sunday. Start looking around for a 6-inch or larger wire, plastic, or ceramic pot with a hole in it. And we'll work from there.
Sunflower Sunday in 2 weeks.
Hopefully, I'll put it in news and notes.
Okay.
Bring
And bring pots if you want a sunflower for your
or ceramic, or
plastic or ceramic.
6-inch with a hole in the bottom.
My gosh, so many rules. 6-inch and a hole in the bottom. Okay. Dennis, of course, as most of you know, is our very generous provider of plants, months and months and months on end, and we are so grateful. I have some very successful plants myself growing on my balcony. Charlie was standing up.
Yes, so 7 speedy weeks ago today, yesterday,
Yes,
celebrated my father's life,
yes.
and we had intended chicory to be part of the flower display, which wasn't yet in bloom. We missed it by 2 days. It's been in full summer bloom, and so I ran out and scooped up the roadside and put it in the wheelbarrow for today. And by the way, this color of shirt, Land's End, guess the name. Chicory.
Charlie just announced that the flowers that are behind me are some that he rescued from the side of the road. Chicory, which was not quite in bloom for time for his father's memorial service, it bloomed 2 days later. So we once again memorializing his father, Al Fisher. It's a beautiful arrangement. I'll get out of the way so people can see it. Okay, another one, right.
So that Julia doesn't have to try to repeat this. My daughter, who lives in the Florida Keys and hates it for any number of reasons, was here last week, and she's on her way driving back now. And she sent me a photo of a roadside sign that says, "Live so that if your life was a book, Florida would ban it."
Thus ends the service. I think we can all go home now. Oh my God. Any others? Well, we had a lot of celebrations today. Any others? All right, we will move to the meat of the service now. This is the dialogue between Peter Krouwer. Oh, sorry. Oh, can you hear here if I yell? What can we do about this,
Speak into the mic.
Alex? Well, yeah, but is this enough? You can hear here? Peter, you're going to have to eat the mic. Eat the mic. Okay, here we go. We also are very happy. I forgot to mention that Reverend Beth has joined us. She wouldn't have had to because she has the day off, but she's here.
But I'm here because Pam's not.
Pam's not here. Somebody's got to open.
And I'm happy to be here.
Is this good? Can you hear me? If I yell and I'm right on top of the mic. Cool. Okay. I will introduce Peter Krouwer, who's going to be standing with me as I introduce the remarks that we're going to be making. So our theme for the summer is diversity. The services have been stimulating and instructive, exploring different areas of diversity. I chose this topic today, diversity of opinion, at the risk of actually encouraging divisiveness. The two words are so similar, diversity, divisiveness, but their meanings are so opposite. So my goal is to help us all listen carefully and respect other views, especially within our own loving community. Can you hear me back there still? Okay. We UUs want to be fully conscious that white privilege is a thing, It exists and has existed since before our nation was founded. I hope we can all agree that we do live in a white supremacy culture, purposely built to our advantage. But we also should understand that the term white privilege is very broad and can be interpreted in many ways. We should understand those different views. More importantly, we need to learn how to dialogue with those family and friends, like Peter, who see issues differently and then find common ground. I chose white privilege to practice this skill, but of course there are many other topics that would be interesting to discuss. And lo and behold, there is another member of our UCH who does have a different view of the term, our very own Peter Krouwer. Many of you may have already heard him on the topic. Because we are both reasonable people and good listeners, I thought we could practice exchanging opinions in a civilized manner. We'll see, setting a good example for all of you to follow. Let's hope my assumption is correct. Following our brief dialogue, which will include various statements of our beliefs, I'll invite you to share your views. And we won't stay all day, but we will have a good time to discuss your views. But remember, the goal is to maintain our loving community and respect for each other. So because this is my service, I will start. My definition of white privilege is simple: that white people in the U.S. are born with an advantage over people of color. Often they misinterpret that privilege and believe that they really are superior. Historically, it has been easier for us to build wealth, although I haven't built much, but vote for people who look like us, etc. A simple example is which Peter gave me, is the driving while black syndrome. I, as a white woman, never even think of being pulled over, while black men and boys need to know exactly how to behave when that happens so that they can avoid trouble.
As you might expect, I have a little bit different point of view. How's that? Everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. What I think, and I've written this all down, so I don't misspeak, but there's no question that white people have advantages over blacks, but so do Asians, and so do Indians from India. But you never hear the term driving while Asian or Asian privilege, because what you're really dealing with is black discrimination. And I think that's really the heart of it, black discrimination, more than white privilege. Telling poor white people, and most poor people are white, that they have white privilege is just meaningless and just creates a backlash.
That may be true that poor whites don't feel privileged at all.
Well, the problem, and I really hate the term white privilege, and I think it's overused. But one of the other reasons is, as opposed to using the term black discrimination, is I think it's a way to make white people feel bad and feel guilty. A perfect example: I didn't succeed on merit and hard work. I succeeded because of white privilege.
But I don't see it as making us feel guilty. I see it as making me aware that it's real, so that I don't keep up the myth that I'm inherently smarter. I did get to go to college, I did get to get a master's degree, but I never thought of it as because I was white and I was privileged.
Well, that's one way of looking at it, and I see your point. Another example I have is, how's that? Another example I have of making white people feel bad is when white people are all called racist. Like, I don't know if you've read the book White Fragility. I haven't read it, but I read the synopsis. And they call all white people racist, and I've heard this from other people too. And when I think of racists, I think of the Proud Boys, neo-Nazis, people that use the N-word, and I don't want to be lumped in with those people. We all have bias, everybody has bias, but that doesn't make us racist. And calling people names and racist is just not helpful. It doesn't accomplish anything.
I do agree. I don't believe the idea of white privilege assumes that all whites are racist. I do agree, people don't like to be labeled racist, neo-Nazi, or anything ugly. As soon as a name is called, the other person may, in a knee-jerk reaction, start defending views instead of discussing them.
Absolutely, absolutely. And another observation is I don't think people don't feel responsible for what their forefathers did. It's hard to say. Forefathers did. Painting our country as racist, which I've heard a lot, canceling our founding fathers, and highlighting every evil white people have done to blacks, creates the kind of backlash where the Board of Education in Florida wants teachers to teach that the skills that slaves learned is a positive result of slavery, as if there could be any positive results from slavery.
I do hear you, but I believe that that view is a little extreme. Most people who agree with me, right, do not paint the country as racist. That term is as broad as white privilege. But we can't deny nor stop teaching our history that slavery was an evil from which we are still recovering. Here are 2 fun facts. Among the first 14 presidents, 12 were slave owners. Who can tell me which ones didn't own slaves? Anybody? And John Quincy Adams. Right. Good answer.
Who were they?
John Adams and John Quincy Adams were the only 2 of the first 14 presidents who didn't own slaves. And I don't agree that we're canceling the founders. We're just lowering their pedestals and accepting them for what they were. And all the living former presidents and current president, get this, the living former presidents and the current president have ancestors who were slave owners, except for one, and that was Donald Trump. Who knew? But he would have if he'd had a chance. Anyway. However, once again, I agree that just talking about our ancestors' sins without thinking of how we can continue improving the lives of those who have been impacted by the past is wrong.
Well, I totally agree. See, we agree on something. Another thing I find interesting is that liberals and progressives suggest you read social justice books about race. I guess their conclusion is, if you only knew about all the evils that white people did, racism would end. The irony is, only liberals read these books. It's like preaching to the choir. And I don't think the MAGA crowd and the GOP is lining up how to be an anti-racist or white fragility. And frankly, even if they did, I doubt it would make any difference.
Well, I do have to agree that the MAGA crowd won't be reading these books. But I believe reasonable people are reading the books. They're bestsellers, many of them are. Or at least they're hearing people discuss them. Sometimes progress is made in baby steps. If one great idea from a social justice book could influence a few moderate voices, that's a win.
Well, I hope you're right, and that many moderates are influenced positively. I think that definitely is a win. Unfortunately, and I think this is one of the biggest problems, is that I think most people really don't care about racism, other than to say it's bad. And they're not willing to take an active role in fighting it, if in fact they even knew what that entails. The church and most liberals are obsessed with fighting racism, but what have they done about it? Other than recommend reading social justice books, have social justice meetings where they talk about racism, and making white people feel guilty about being white. And frankly, nothing has changed. We still have racism. We've had it in the past, we have it now, and we're going to have it in the future.
Wow, that's a broad statement. When you say most people, unless you have data to back it up, people do go on living their day-to-day busy lives. And actually, the one thing I would add to what he said is that people do go protest in the streets. All the Black Lives Matter protests were really quite large. Other than that, they do go on living their day-to-day busy lives without taking action. And they think, well, maybe somebody else will do it. But I do believe they care. They feel powerless to help, or they just don't have time to think about it. We just need to know about the issues to help us honestly relate to people of color. So what do you think we should do to fight racism and discrimination, Peter?
I'm glad you asked. I've had this discussion with other people, and I think it's hard, if not really impossible, to change people's minds. And the way I look at racism, there's two aspects of racism. There's how people think, which I think is very hard to change how people think, and there's the way people act. And that the acting is discrimination, and that's something that I think you can attack. We've attacked it with laws like outlawing redlining and things like that. There's not only the act of discrimination, there's the results of discrimination over the years, like the inner city slums, which are terrible, and I think that's something you can attack. If we could only rehabilitate inner city slums by education, getting rid of the gangs, housing, a job, so on and so forth. If we could help black businesses by giving loans or grants, those are the kinds of things that I think could help. It's not going to eliminate racism, but it would help fight discrimination and help make lives of minorities much better.
Well said, Peter. So we can certainly agree on those steps, and I think we also could look into education. But most importantly, I think we need to involve people of color in the conversation and listen to them. What is it that they feel they need? What could make their lives better? Maybe they don't want to still think about how wronged they were and how bad everything was. Maybe they would like to look to the future and have their opinions honored for that. One really encouraging thing is, of course, that we now have our second black mayor in Chicago, and that might help. But quality schools might be on their list as well.
Third black mayor.
Third, Harold Washington.
Harold?
Oh, sorry, yes. You're going to have a chance to talk in just 30 seconds. So don't interrupt me. Okay. Listen, people. Right. But then you act on those needs. So now, fellow UU, since Peter has been brave enough to stand up here, and I've been brave enough to stand up here, what do you think? We'd like to have a discussion of about, what time is it, 15 minutes? And if you want to come and talk into the mic so the folks at home can hear you, and if not, I will be glad to repeat what you're saying. Dave, I saw your hand first.
Okay.
Yay.
First of all, best church in the world. All these discussions, they all degenerate into shouting. And thank you, Julia. Thank you, Peter.
Yes.
What a great service.
Yes.
I took notes. I wouldn't say that the message is all white people are racist. I think the message is all people have racism. Since before history, people have seen strangers and they've not trusted them. And that was a good idea evolutionarily, but we got to get over it. And I think reminding us that there's racism gives us the ability to make our government and our organizations change things. I don't feel responsible for slavery. My ancestors got here long after slavery was over. But there's still discrimination going on. And I think recognizing that there is white privilege is the first step for us to want the government to change. And I think there is change going on, and it's a part of the education that we're going through. We've seen, like, government has now contracting policies that put money into black-owned businesses, black neighborhoods, that didn't happen just 3 years ago. And we've seen all sorts of non-governmental organizations recognize that they're not being accessed by non-white people. And over again, they're finding out ways, how do we provide our services to people who don't look like us? I think that's a result of the education that's going on.
Please stand behind the microphone stand, so you're in the center on YouTube.
Right here, right?
Right about there.
Right here. Who, you had your hand up, Jane? Oh, you sure? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Jane, you want to
Of
come up
course.
here? And keep the mic.
Peter asked, what can we do? There's one thing that every one of us can do over and over again, and that is vote.
Vote.
Absolutely.
Yes.
We vote lawmakers into office who will create the kind of laws this country needs, and a lot of those changes have taken place. And we need to continue to do that one very important thing.
Yes.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, we can all agree that education affects how people think. Am I right? Okay, Peter brought up something a couple of times. He said some of the activities or whatever of social justice have made white people feel guilty. Now, I take umbrage with that because only you can control how you feel. But education is so important. You teach people. I have a neighbor who during the Black Lives Matter riots called me over to talk to me about it. And once she said, I have friends who are black, I knew who I was talking to. I have friends who are black, but. And I wanted so desperately to hand her just the first chapter of the book, Caste. Because that first chapter just, it synopsizes everything, if that's a word. And that's a way of teaching. I don't know if it would affect her. How can I force her, like Clockwork Orange or something, to read it? But as I said, I think education is key. How people think is much more important, Peter, than dwelling on how they feel. If you feel guilty, that's on you. Seriously. Thank you for listening.
Joe?
Yes, I wanted to take issue with, I call it original.
Closer to the mic.
I wanted to take issue with having white guilt laid upon me at birth. I was not born with white privilege. I grew up in a working class neighborhood, blacks and whites living together. Black fathers worked with my father in a factory, and I did an awful lot to get rid of Catholicism's original sin. And what was said here put the sin of racism on me, that I wasn't born with it. The other thing I'd like to mention is how we can address these things on a closer, nearer basis. And the word that comes to my mind is not racism, but prejudice. Prejudice is prejudging someone. Because he's black, he's going to steal my telephone. Because he's Hispanic, he's running around with a shiv that he wants to stick in my back. So let's not prejudge people. He's shorter than me. Should I prejudge him? Thank you. Thank you.
Well, the whole question of white privilege. Okay. How about now?
Yeah, it's great.
Okay, so I don't believe that poor white people have white privilege, but they still vote against their interests, right? Because they feel that if others also gain from their vote and from, political, governmental programs and things like that, that takes away from them, and that's a mindset we have to get over. Now, with the black community, I have a lot of experience dealing with minority folks because I'm a landlord in the inner city. So a lot of these folks don't have the opportunities of people here in Hinsdale, okay? They pretty much live hand to mouth, right? They have one or two jobs they try to keep. They try to pay their bills on time, but they don't have like resources or reserves in the bank that always, pay their bills on time. They don't have, now Nancy pointed out a very important thing about education. They don't have the knowledge of like how to manage their money, how to put money aside for things. They just, try to survive. That's basically it. And then I, as a landlord, have to be like a payday lender, right? I have to like wait for them to get paid so on a certain time of the month so that I get my rent. So that's something that us here in, Leave It to Beaver communities don't understand about what's going on in the inner city.
Hi, my name is Mike Pabian, and I think I can't tell you how much I've learned since the Black Lives Movement has taken effect. And the idea of white privilege didn't make me feel guilty as much as it made me feel stupid. I'll give you an example. Some people have heard this before. I used to tell a joke, kind of jokingly, among my friends who had small male children. Having experienced my own male children's encounter with police, I used to tell them, if someday the police call and if nobody's been hurt, don't panic. On the way home, you'll turn to your son and say, what were you thinking? What were you thinking? And the answer will always be the same. I don't know. Which is the answer I got with my kids. Of course, I had no conception of the talk that Black families have to have with their male children about encounters with police. I had absolutely no clue. I think the education, my own education about this, I'm grateful for. The other thing I notice, I think as a society, we're moving along. You see things on television. I think television is a great mechanism. I think it did a lot for acceptance of gays. I think it did a lot by portraying gay characters positively. I think the same thing is happening in just, how many years ago was it that you never saw a mixed race couple in a commercial? Now, it's like you see it every day, which is really, I think, really kind of a cool idea that let's look at people as people. And for want of a better thing, I'm going to praise Shonda Rhimes. Hello. If anybody's seen, there's Bridgerton, but there's this. What's her name? The Queen. Charlotte. Queen Charlotte. It's really interesting casting Black characters in the roles of Old English gentry, and it's really interesting about how that can be pulled off in a way that, for people who stop and think about it, say, yeah, we're all just people. Why can't a Black character play this role? And I think we're moving, as a society, we're moving towards more, not just tolerance, but acceptance and I'm hoping that progress continues. And for every step, 2 steps forward, there's going to be a step back. But I think, we're, as a society, you don't see people advocating for Jim Crow laws and segregation like they did in the 50s. My God, Lord, that's.
I grew up in India. So I grew up in India, and nobody ever said that I have brown privilege, because everybody was brown, or different shades of brown. But yet I was privileged. So I think that privilege was actually socioeconomic rather than anything else. And I think there was a rap song once that said, how far you get depends on where you start. And I think that's true for any society. And I think the problem with the US is, I was watching a YouTube video this morning, and they said something like, in the next 10 years, the top 3 Americans will own more, have more assets than the bottom half of America. So if that's not shocking, I don't know what is. And I think Noam Chomsky said that this winner takes all is an American doctrine, and there's only 3 ways in which it ends. Either it's riots, war, or revolution. So I'd say, let's reverse course, or one of these 3 will happen.
And the income disparity just gets worse.
Two things. The first is that next Tuesday, a week from Tuesday, the Great Decisions is getting together in Downers Grove at the Public Library. And we get together both in person by Zoom. And I invite any of you to email me asking more about this, because if you can't attend, at least you could access it by Zoom. And the topic is, how can we address the political divisions? Very interesting topic. I've been doing a lot of research on that, and there are a lot of answers to that. The second is a story, a personal story that I had when I was working for the Institute of Real Estate Management. I was, as a staff member, I was responsible for overseeing many of the committees. And the chairman of one of the committee, who happened to be Jewish, came into my office one day, and he said, "Ron, if you weren't Jewish, I wouldn't tell you this story." It was the worst anti-Semitic joke that I have ever heard in my life. I didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. So, there's so many levels of prejudice, misunderstanding. That's kind of summarizes it.
Thank you so much. I'd like to follow up on what Jane said. We live in Illinois, and voting for a liberal in Illinois is pretty easy. Voting for a progressive in Illinois is pretty easy. But if you live in Mississippi or Alabama or Georgia or Florida, not so easy. So perhaps one of the things that we could think about is not only voting, but contributing to candidates who are running in those states where they have a really difficult time getting support and trying to get elected. Because changing Illinois, not going to help that much. Changing Georgia, changing Mississippi, changing Florida, that's going to help some.
Well, I anticipated this to be a very well-attended service, and I'm right. and there's lots of people on YouTube. I'm sorry, I expected this would be a well-attended service, and I'm right. And there's lots of people on YouTube, and a few were saying that they applaud Julia and Peter for taking this on. So I thought I would just share that with everybody here. Just that people appreciated that you two took this on.
Black poverty is a real problem, as we all know. And one solution, one thing that would help alleviate black poverty is increasing the minimum wage. About 5 years ago, laws were passed in the state legislature and Cook County and the city of Chicago to implement a schedule to increase the minimum wages in those areas. And what's happened since then is the states, adjusted for inflation, the state's minimum wage is now a couple dollars higher than it was, but it's nowhere near the equivalent of $15. The city of Chicago's wage is now over $15, but adjusted for inflation, it's actually less than it was when the law was passed. In Cook County, it's over $15, but it's equal to what it was when it was passed. So those efforts from 5 years ago have pretty much failed. And that's something that, people should be contacting their aldermen and their state legislatures and talking to them about setting up new laws, new programs to try to raise the minimum wage to what they call living wage, which nowadays would probably be $25 an hour.
Yes, Reverend Beth.
Not gonna be long.
It's all right. It's your privilege. You have the privilege of the pulpit.
Yeah, but you're all worried, oh geez, it's late and they just gave the preacher a mic. I get the mic all the time, so I'm not gonna say too much other than to say thank you to you both. You are an enormously gracious presence. Thank you, Peter, and thank you for everyone who spoke. So we do have some things to say. I'm probably not going to say them all, but what can we do? One of the things that we can do is we can support the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. It's a reigniting of Dr. King's campaign. And what Reverend Dr. William J. Barber and the Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris call us to is to a third reconstruction, because we really are seeing a rollback to voting rights and with an intention. One of the things that we work on in the campaign is systemic racism, poverty, the war economy, meaning the militarization of our communities and our borders, ecological devastation, and the false moral narrative of religious nationalism. Because this is what we know. We know that everything is connected and everything is at stake, and all of these things matter. One of the things that the campaign does, which happened during the Civil Rights Movement and it happened at Reconstruction, is brings together poor white folk, poor people of color, because it isn't just people who are black siblings who are the result, who are having the effect of all of this discrimination and racism, but it's all people of color. One of the things that was the clear intention at Reconstruction was to put a wedge between poor whites and poor blacks. And so join the Poor People's Campaign. I happen to be the co-chair of the UUA Leadership Council for the Poor People's Campaign. You'll be hearing more about it. When thousands of people take to the street, it does make a difference. So I just wanted to thank you all for this dialogue and the opportunities to deepen further into understanding that we have an opportunity to birth a wholly new humanity that is uplifting the flourishing and the well-being of all. That's it.
Very well said, Reverend Beth. Thank you. Was there anyone else who wished to speak? Well, as I think we know that it's not the beginning of this conversation. We've had these conversations before for years, but we have to continue them. because we're still facing the same issues. And my goal was to help those who might have Peter's views, thank you, Peter, Peter's views, or like them, like they don't feel white privilege, they don't understand, et cetera, they're not racist. Wanted everybody who may have those views to feel comfortable here. Isn't this the church where we accept and love those who differ? I don't know about the MAGA people. I don't know, but we won't talk about that. It's another day, right. But I do hope that this is a continuation of the conversation. We are a small but mighty, mighty congregation. We do a lot that's beyond our size. I'd sure like to see us grow. Like to see us grow with more people of color, and that might happen in the future. Those of you who know those folks, let's do a little proselytizing. Let's get people in here, because this is the church of understanding and love. Thank you all for your thoughtful discussion. I knew it would be. And now we will go to the final reading with Tony Metters.
Reading by Sophia Lyons-Vaz, the founder of Unitarian Religious Education. It matters what we believe. Some beliefs are like walled gardens. They encourage exclusiveness and the feeling of being especially privileged. Other beliefs are expansive and lead the way into a wider and deeper sympathies.
Thank you, Tony. Those are some of my favorite words from Sophia Paz. And now we will figuratively extinguish the chalice. Blow it out. If you remember the words, I'm sorry I did not print them off for you, but we should know them. Ready? We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of its truth, nor the fire of our commitment. These we cherish in our hearts and share with all the world. And the benediction is from the Bible, from Jesus. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall inherit the earth. Carolyn, take us out.
Oh, yeah. Well.